This is an overview of the 4 elements model. Use this model for the Embodied Facilitator course and many other courses. I found this an incredibly helpful model over the years. You need some model of preference, right? So why? Well, so you can make sense of your own experience and that of other people. 4 elements is extremely useful for looking at potential strengths and weaknesses in yourself and helping clients. Also giving a range of options. So for example, in 4 elements coaching, it means we can coach in different ways, and it also can help a client like brainstorm an idea through different embodiments, and it creates a map for that. You could do it in other ways. Important things to say about it: it's a model of preference, not a model of type. So it's not about putting people in boxes and saying you are a fire. It's about we all have all of them. And the other thing to say is it's just the model, right? It's not literal, you're not a fire, yeah? There's it's a metaphor that can be used as a category for a number of features that tend to go together. Some people might say, what about 5 elements or 6 elements? So, I've even come across something like 30 element model in one Indian tantric system. Yes, there are other models. 5 elements is pretty common, one Chinese version, one Tibetan Indian version. However, 4 I like, it's simple and it creates 2 essential polarities that we can work with. So it's sort of simpler. What I like about this model also, it's fairly intuitive. So if I say John is fiery, or I don't know, Sarah's an airhead, for example, it's in common language. Most people are going to guess something similar. Though, if you've done other versions of 4 elements before, many people have these days, I'd say be a little bit cautious that they might not be exactly the same as the one you'll do with me. Normally this crossover, but I saw one instance, for example, I think Tetramap it's called, where their earth and fire were actually just totally renamed from how I would call earth and fire. That's a bit unusual. Mostly there's just minor variations. Like I remember one Bhutto teacher from Israel, her fire was very sparky. I was like, okay, it's a little bit different from how I would do fire, but it was interesting. And often I'm with 4 elements, I'm building over time my understanding of it, and for you too, rather than sort of have it very specific, it has to be, this is earth to move in this way, right? So, good general model, good for understanding yourself, good for understanding clients. You can, even just how a client walks into the room, oh, sounds a bit fiery. You'll hear it quite quickly. How people shake hands, how people introduce themselves, the office layout someone has, people's environment tends to be representative. The earthy people are very ordered, the water people, a picture of their kids and their dog on the desk. Yeah, all right. So you'll see it in people's environments as well as in their bodies. Though sometimes environments are compensatory, that's a bit complicated. Generally, they're indicative. So you see it in the environments, you hear it in the way people speak. Obviously, from an embodiment point of view, we're looking at it through movement. Why do it this way as opposed to give people a psychometric test to evaluate themselves? Well, people might have an idea that they're earthy, but actually it's not really true. Telling people they're a particular element more, their preferences for a particular element, doesn't really work. It gets resistance. But by doing it through the body, and this is a basic embodied method, people are able to feel and go, oh, okay, that one is more comfortable. And it might just be on one day, so it can be useful, this idea that we're embodied in place and time and relationship. But over time people see, and you'll see if you're on EFC, like, oh yeah, it seems consistently like water feels more comfortable, or air feels really annoying and difficult and uncomfortable. Yeah, so you'll be able to self-assess through experience rather than, and then help clients self-assess through experience rather than just being told it by an authority figure, which is disempowering and often just rejected anyway. So that's why we use the body for this method. The other reason is you get to inhabit other preferences that might not be yours, which can give you a sense of empathy and understanding for them, it comes through the body rather than just cognitively. I've actually had married couples that have been married for 40 years in workshops who have done the elements, and they've gone, oh, that's why you're like that. I thought you were just an alien. Right, so it's really cool to see people who haven't had the empathy, maybe for years, even with people they really care about, to develop that quickly through the body and to experience it. And the second reason there is to build range. Yeah, so yes, on all my courses, I want people to build awareness, but it's not really enough. It's not enough to be like, oh look, I'm fucked up. It's actually better to be able to say, yes, I have this preference, this personality, and I can develop myself, whether it's a state shift. You can use 4 elements as a way of looking at state, but also over time through practicing something. I don't know, maybe you practice karate to become more earth and fire, for example. Yeah, And if you're on EFC, you'll be designing your practice for yourself with this in mind. And I'd say you don't have to look at your practice through the lens of 4 elements, but it can be very helpful to do that, to keep it simple. Normally you want to pick 1 element at a time to work with, to focus on, to build as a muscle, as it were, over time. 4 elements can also be used as well as to state shift, to build a way of being over time, to understand oneself. It can also be used to design teams. So for example, why am Vilya, my Russian colleague, a very good team? Well, she's the brakes to my accelerator, the earth to my air. I'm the fun one, she's the serious one. More often, you know, I don't put her in a box, she's got a fun side. I can be the fiery one, she's normally more the sort of watery, considerate one. We work well together. It's also where we look at our room team this way. I've analysed whole companies of hundreds of people, and you'll see like the New York office over on the far side when we do it, you know, put them in different sides of the room. You'll see, you know, different, oh, there's the HR one lone watery person or whatever it is, yeah? So very useful for looking at patterns in groups of people as well as in individuals. Okay, so there's a little theory of the 4 elements. The more you can say about, I can say about this, there's reading, there's other videos on it more specifically. In terms of the movement patterns, I'll just break down some of those patterns. Doing this in person is much richer, but earth pattern tends to be slower, more linear. I might get people doing squares, for example. Yeah, moving slower than they normally do in straight lines. It's feeling down in the body, so we can look at the elements as parts of the body as well as movement patterns. It's structure, stability, groundedness, all of these things. Paying attention to the feet, doing things sometimes with rhythm in a slow way. This is more the earth pattern. It's taking some concentration for me to do this now, actually. This is not my home pattern and just the mood I'm in today. But that earth pattern of slowing down, adding structure and movement. And notice, even watching this video, how that's impacting you. If you're on my courses, we'll try this in a bigger way in person. But just even watching the video, notice how it impacts you. If it feels familiar is the key thing here. Water pattern, slightly softer, more open. Softening the spine, opening the posture. And again, it's not about one shape. You know, we can use EYP shapes, for example, to engage patterns, but it's about the whole pattern. And the pattern for water is receiving, accommodating, flowing. If I had more space, I'd move around more. Still a belly in the lower half of the body, but with more fluidity now and a little bit more relational, perhaps. Yeah, relationships in earth tend to be formal. In water, a little closer, a little bit more connection. Eye, peripheral. You can really use any body part to explore an element, like the eyes, the spine, the breath, the sound, and the type of relationship, the feet, and the whole body is involved. Notice again if that's familiar, a more watery way of doing things, more relational, more accommodating. And then fire. Give me a minute, a little shake we often use between them to sort of reset. Fire for me is the spine, slightly more convex, the breathing's more in the chest. I'm aware more of this part of the body. There can be a linearity, a fierceness, and a passion. You know, any element can be kind of subdivided. So fire can be like a boundary, like a no. It could be a directionality or a passion. They're all involved in fire. So it's, that is the breath, that is the spine. There's engagement, there's a bit more speed. We're going from slow to quicker here, more emotional expression rather than just reception, and a fierceness, a this, not this, not this, a cutting, a direction, and an expression, a fuck yeah, or a no. Okay, so fire, noticing that is more familiar, more comfortable, more at ease. Not just noticing if you like it, because you can like the unfamiliar. Usually it's the opposite, but it's the familiar thing we're looking for. Again, just watching this, we'll get to move around more doing this in person. Lastly, air, so more the head and above the head, the breath, the lightness. You know, there can be this, wow, expansive quality to air, like dude, you know, it always feels like Northern Californian to me. It can be like funny though and silly. It can be like that quality to air. Like there's, you know, there's the other what's his name, Robin Williams, you know, whatever. It's kind of up here in the fingers can really help with that. The unpredictability, the moving. It's a bit hard to do in staying in one place for a camera, but the sparkiness, the different and then the space. Yeah, 5-element model space is added as the next one, but we incorporate it into air. Air, yeah, hard to get back on track with air for the camera. So noticing if that's familiar, obviously all of these have advantages and disadvantages, right? So we could go through each of them with a client and say, let's say someone's very at home in the air pattern, say advantages of that. It's one of my home patterns. I could say, well, you know, I tend to be creative, I tend to be fun, I tend to be light around certain things, yeah. And then disadvantages and a little bit scatty, get a bit lost, might be a bit silly sometimes and I shouldn't be. Can be a bit all over the place. Addictive patterns sometimes around air, like, oh, new thing, favorite thing, yeah. Relationship pros and cons to air. Could be the fun guy at the party, but maybe also shallow around certain things or kind of always looking for something new and novel, yeah. So I can analyze my kind of strengths and weaknesses that way, what I bring to a team that way. In embodiment terms, noticing the state of air, for example, when I go into that state, as well as being able to shift out of that state, feel the feet on the ground. What are we doing? We're filming something, yeah? And also a long-term practice. Maybe I start improv comedy or particular trapeze, you know, some very literal air practice in order to build that way of being in myself, or the opposite, more earth way of being, yeah? Okay, so a bit of an intro to the 4 elements. We'll go a lot deeper into each one individually. Strengths and weaknesses, how they show up in teams, different kinds of relationship you might have, like the competitive fire versus the cooperative water. Loads more we can say about that, but that's a good beginning.